Today's daf yomi is Bava Basra daf Yudches Bava Basra 18, and today's daf yomi is dedicated for a shmira for the Chayalim, Hatzalah for the Shluim, and a Yeshua for Am Yisrael in this difficult time. This is the daf yomi for Shabbos, and we're recording it on Friday afternoon. So the daf yomi is discussing a dispute between Abaye and Rava, whether or not you could build something on your property, which right now it's not damaging the other person's property. But if the person will eventually put something up there like a wall or a well, it would be damaging to it. So Abaye says, since right now you're not damaging it, therefore you're allowed to put it up. Whereas Rava says you can't put it up because since in the future the person puts something up, it would be damaging. So the Gemara is going to try and challenge Rava's position on the basis of our Mishnah. So on the bottom of 17b, the Gemara says, Tashma, we learned in our Mishnah, Merchikin es agefes vesazevel. We have to, in our property, we have to distance the gefes. The gefes is the after you squeeze out the oil from the olives, that's whatever remains, and the zevel is the manure. The es melach and the salt, vesasid and the lime, vesasalayim and the rocks. You have to distance this mikoso shel chavero shlosha tefachim. You have to distance, even though it's on your property, you have to keep it 3 tefachim away from your neighbor's wall. So, osa basid, or alternatively, what you could do is you could pay to have your friend's wall treated with lime to protect it. And then we see from here that what's the reason why you have to distance it? Time of the ikakosel, because your friend already has a wall up. Awekakosel, but if your friend would not have the wall up, then it would be permitted. Somech, then you'd be permitted. So there's a question on Rava who says it's even allowed even if your friend doesn't have a wall up already. So it's a challenge to Rava. So the Gemara says no. No, even if you wouldn't have a wall, you wouldn't be allowed to put it up. If that's the case, my kamash. Why does our Mishnah say specifically where there's a wall, you have to keep it away? It's teaching us that this material is going to be damaging to a wall. So that's all it's teaching us. That the reasons why you can't put them up is because they're bad for a wall. That's the distinction. It's Mishnah's teaching us the reason. Reason is that it's bad for a wall. So the next attempt, the Gemara says Tashma. The Gemara is going to have a similar series of proofs, which are very similar. Our Mishnah said, you have to distance the seeds in your yard or the plows or the urine. You have to distance it 3 tefachim. So this teaches us, Taima the Ikakosal, this teaches us that you have to distance it from the wall for 3 tefachim. But if there's no wall, you're allowed to put these hazardous items near it. So isn't this a proof against Rama? Because it's only a problem because there's a wall up. And Rama says, no, no, even if there wouldn't be a wall, you still couldn't do it. What's it teaching us? The misunta kasha kosal, that this moisture is difficult for a wall. And so therefore, it's teaching us that these things, the reason why they're problematic is because they're going to cause damage to the wall. We might not have thought that these things would cause damage to the wall, but it's teaching us that this moisture is going to be difficult. They are going to be damaging for a wall. That's what it's teaching us. Next attempt, the Gemara tells us another attempt to challenge Rava. Tashma, that you have to keep the millstone 3 tefachim from the wall, which is 4 from the top of the millstone. So what's the reason? The reason is there's a millstone, time of the ikakosal. The reason is there's a wall, but if there be no wall, then you'd be allowed to do it. And there's the proof against Rabbi Gemara says no, similar answer. Even if there's no wall, you also wouldn't be allowed to place something near the wall. My kamashma, what's it teaching us? It's teaching us kamashman did. So it's teaching us that the vibrations coming off of the millstone, that is what's damaging to the wall. That you might have thought vibrations can cause damage, but we're saying that it does cause damage. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so in next attempt, again, Mara is going to again challenge Rava from another attempt from our Mishnah. It says, Tashma v'satanor shlosha min hakalya, that the oven itself has to be kept three tvachim away from the neighbor's wall, from the base of the oven. Shein arba min hasafa, which is 4 tvachim from the top. So doesn't this prove time adika kosel? The reason is because there's a wall. Aleka kosel, but if there's no wall, someone could be allowed to place it. So this is a question against Rav. The Gemara says no. Kileka kosel namilo samach. Even if there's no wall, you also can't put it. My kamash when it's teaching us kamash malon da'avoa kashal kosel, that just the heat or the steam coming off of the oven is itself damaging to a wall, and that's what it's teaching us. Again, the Gemara is going to try and disprove Rava, but this time it's from the next Mishnah, which we haven't yet done. Tashma, Mishnah tells us, Adam a person is not allowed to open up on their own property a bakery or a shop that dyes garments, or a refet bakar, nor a stable. Now you're not allowed to do this. You can't do any of these things under a place where a person used to store things. You can't do any of these things underneath the storage place of your friend, nor a cattle barn. So basically, you can't open a bakery or a dyeing or a place to dye things or a stable underneath where your friend is storing his possessions, and like his oil or his crops. And the reason why you can't do it is time of the ikakotzer, only because there already is a storage place there. A lake of kotzer, but if there wouldn't be a storage place there, it would be permitted of it. You would be permitted. So then we see from here that you're not allowed to do that. You're allowed to do something, even though it's preventing your friend from having the ability to build something there in the future. So isn't this a refutation of Rava? So Gemara says, no, this case is different. Dira Shani, here we're talking about a place where it's considered to be like your residence or like your industry, which unlike something which is you're just putting in your yard. This is a place which is your actual residence. And a place which is your actual residence, you don't have the restrictions against future use by your neighbor. That's a difference. And Gemara is drawing a distinction between use of your yard, which is prohibited against future use if you're going to prohibit your friend's future use of it, and your residence, which is permitted even though you're limiting your friend's future use. The Gemara is drawing that distinction. And indeed, Daikanami, we can draw such an inference that Tani Maisa Refes Bakar Kodemas Otzer Mutter, that if your stable came before he set up the storeroom, it's going to be permitted because and so therefore, so we see from here that since this was your residence, therefore it's going to be permitted and not in other cases. So that's a distinction. Tashma, again, Rabbis go with a challenge from the following case, that the case says, that a person is not allowed to plant a tree next to the field of a neighbor, unless he distances himself 6 amos from the border, because the tree's roots go down and damage it. The Tani Allah, and we learned about this, Arba Amasham, these 4 cubits that you have to distance, so that a person, your neighbor, will be able to basically so that you can have enough space to work a vineyard without ruining the property. So basically, what we're saying is that you have to leave space between your tree or the grapevine and the neighboring and the border, so that when he plows around this tree, he's not going to be entering into his neighbor's field. So you have to leave enough space that you won't be going into your neighbor's property. So Taima de Mishum Kidei Avodas HaKerem. So what's the reason that you have to go far away distance so that you'll be able to work your vineyard? Halav Mishum Kidei Avodas HaKerem. But if it weren't be for the fact that you have to be able to work your vineyard, Samach, you could go right up to the boundary. Afagav the Ika Sharash and the Kamatsky, even though there is going to be eventually the roots that come out from your yard that will go into your neighbor's property and will cause damage. So we see from here as a proof against Rava, because Rava said you're not allowed to do something which will eventually prevent your neighbor from from being able to work. So the Gemara says, no, the reason why you're allowed to go up until the border normally is because the mafzik the Mishnah is referring to a case where there is a rock that's in between the two fields, and so therefore, since the rock will stop the roots from penetrating, therefore you'll be able to go up. Therefore, you don't have to worry, and that's what Rava is talking about. So basically, even Rava would allow you to go up to the border, were not for the fact that you need space to work your vineyard and your tree. And indeed, we could prove this from that this is what the Mishnah is talking to, because it says that if there was a fence in between the two fields, if there was a fence between the two fields, then you could go right up to the border. And so this teaches us that Rava would say that we're not for the fact that, so this proves that there was a rock underneath which prevents the roots from going in. Okay, so Gemara says, if that's the case, if that's your argument, that there's a rock in between. Ema Seifa, what's the next clause? Are you Sharash of Yotzin B'toch Shachavero? The next clause says if his roots were going into his neighbor's property, the next clause of the Mishnah says that if the roots were going into the neighbor's property, then the neighbor is allowed to cut them to a depth of 3 tefachim, meaning to say, if one person has a tree that goes into his neighbor's property, the roots go in, then you could cut the roots up to 3 tefachim deep so that you could plow. So it doesn't interrupt the plow. If you're saying there's a stone in between that prevents the roots from going there, my bawasam, what are they even doing there? So it can't be that that's the scenario. The Gemara says, no, this is what the Mishnah means. But if there's no barrier, and the roots are going into his neighbor's property, then the neighbor is allowed to cut them up to 3 tefachim deep so his plow doesn't get hurt. Where again brings a question against Rava from the next Mishnah. You have to keep the tree far away from a pit, 25 amos. Doesn't that prove time of the ikabor? Because there's already a pit there, a lekabor. But if there was no pit, you could go up to the wall. Samech. The Gemara says no. Even if there's no pit, you also can't go right up. Akamashmon is teaching us that esrim chamesh shama azli charashim maskilabor. It's teaching us that up to 25 amos, that's how far a tree can go and do damage. If that's the case, Ema Seifa, doesn't the next clause say Ilan Kadim, that if the tree was there first, well, Yaakotz, he doesn't have to cut down the tree. Now, if it's the case that according to Rava, you can't put it down there because it might come and do damage, well, then how can you ever have the tree within 25 amos? Because according to Rava, it's not allowed. Gemara says, Rav Papa says below Keach. There we're talking about a case where basically what happened was there was there we're talking about a case below Keach. We're talking about a case there where there was a purchaser, where there was a buyer, and Hachinami, and that's what we're talking about here below Keach. The Mishnah is talking about a case where the first owner planted it, and then he sold it to another person, and that person went and dug a pit near the tree. So there, since the tree was planted legally, because the person who bought it, therefore he's not required to remove it, the owner. Tashma, what about the next case? Another attempt to disprove Rava. Marchikinas mishra min hayerak. You have to distance the you have to distance the mishra from the yerak. What's the mishra? And the mishra is the place where they would soak the flax to get out the parts they don't want from the flax, and you have to distance that from the vegetables by you have to distance them. and you have to distance the leeks from the onions because that's going to ruin the taste of the onions. And the mustard from the bees. You have to distance all this. Now, what's the reason why you have to? What's the reason why you have to distance them? Time of the Ika Yerik, because there's already a vegetables there. Haleka Yerik, but if there are no vegetables, samach, you could put it and thereby prevent the other person from putting it down. The Gemara says no. Kileka Yerik nami lo samach. Well, kamashmon dahani kashu adadi. So it's teaching us that it's just teaching us this idea that it's difficult for each other. The Gemara says, well, if that's the case, but the next quote says, Rabbi Yossi matir b'chardo. Rabbi Yossi allows you to put the mustard seed there because you could say to him, Rabbi Yossi allows you to put the mustard there because Rabbi Yossi says that he could say to him, before you tell me to get rid of my mustard from your bees, you should take away your bees from my mustard, because they're going to come and eat the flowers from my mustard. So we see from here, now if the case is that they're not there at the same time, if you're not allowed to put them down, as Rava says, how can you have such a situation? Since according to Rabbi Yossi, both the bees and the mustard seeds are damaging to the other one. How could they have either been put there? So we're have to say the same idea. We have the same idea that one person purchased it after the other one was there, but the Gemara says but if that's the case, where the person purchased it before after it was already there, my time with the Rabbana, what's the reason why the rabbis say you're not allowed to have it? Since when he did it, when he put the mustard there, he was allowed to do it. Why does he have to remove it? Oh, my time with the Rabbi Yossi. And what's the reason why Rabbi Yossi could say to him? What's the reason for Rabbi Yossi who says he's allowed to do it? I feel Mishra V'Yarkanami. But why does he only allow in the case of the bees? Even in the case of the vegetables, he should also allow it to be there. So the Gemara says, Amaravina, no, Kasavi Rabbanan Amazik Harchikas Atzmo. So the Gemara says, no, the Rabbanan are on the position, their position is that whose responsibility is it to distance yourself? The one who's damaging. And so therefore, even where it was there illegally, even where it was okay, he has to distance himself. Mikal, so the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, the Rabbi Yossi if that's the case, that Rabbi Yossi must be of the position that the guy who's being damaged is responsible to distance himself. Yeah, Nizak, I feel Mishav Yarkinami. Then why does he have to remove the flax and the leeks? He should be allowed to say it's the job of the other guy to move them. So Rabbi Yossi must also say it's the mazik's responsibility to distance himself. This is what Rabbi Yossi is saying to the Rabbanan. Okay, I understand in the case of the flax and the vegetables that you have to move it. The honey maski honey, because these are damaging the other person's property. The flax damages the vegetables. Well, the vegetables don't damage the flax. But the mustard and the bees, they're both damaging to each other. So therefore, why does the mustard have to be removed? Say that the bees have to be removed. The rabbis say that the bees don't damage the mustard. Why? If it's the seeds, the bees can't find the seeds because the seeds of the mustard are enclosed. And ibetarfa and the leaves, hadar pari. Even if the bees eat the leaves will grow back. So the Gemara now goes back to the position that Rabbi Yossi agrees with the rabbis that the damager has to distance himself from the person being damaged. When does Rabbi Yossi really say that it's the person doing the damage has to distance himself? But didn't we learn in the Mishnah, which God willing we'll get to on Daf Kafei, Rabbi Yossi says, even though the pit came before the tree, that the person who has the tree does not have to cut it down, meaning to say, Rabbi Yossi seems to be saying it's the guy who's being damaged responsibility. You're doing it in your property. It's not your fault if the other guy has a pit there. You don't have to move it. So the Gemara says, yes, that is Rabbi Yossi's position. Well, Rabbi Yossi says on Nizak Svirle. Rabbi Yossi says really it's the guy who's being damaged, whose job it is to whose job. But he's just responding to the rabbi's position. What does he say? He says, according to me, I'm of the position. I say that the guy is being damaged. If Ruvain is doing something in his property and it's affecting Shimon, it's Shimon's responsibility to move. Even if you have flax and vegetables, the guy in the flax doesn't need to remove it. But according to you, you say it's the mazik's job to move it. That's what you say. You say it's the mazik jobs to move. Hey, Tainach Mishra V'Yarka, Dahani Maski, Hani Vani Maski. I mean, okay, I understand in the case of the flax and the vegetables, and only the flax is damaging the vegetables, but the vegetables don't damage the flax. Oh, Hardo Dvarim, Shaval Maski Aidadi, but agree to me in the case of the mustard seed and the bees that they're both not damaging. Rabbanim Dvaro Chado Ro Maski, but the rabbis say the bees don't damage the mustard, Iba Binta, because they're not going to do damage, because either the seeds they can't get to or the leaves will grow back. And so therefore that's the position. We see in the end that this is the fundamental dispute between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yossi. The Rabbanan say that the guy who's doing the damage, it's their job, it's his responsibility to make sure that something going on in his property doesn't damage the other person. And Rabbi Yossi says, no, it's the guy, if he's doing something on their property, they're allowed to do something even though it's damaging the other person's property, because it's that person's responsibility to move his assets. All right, we'll stop here. Everybody should have a good shot.